Hello and welcome to another PFF podcast short. I'll be your host today. I'm the ACC analyst and my name is John Breitenbach, and joining me is our quarterback charting guru, Mr. John Cosco. So John, we're talking today about Mitch Trubisky, the North Carolina quarterback. Where do you see him going in this draft, and what do you think his strengths are?
He's going to be a first-round quarterback, and I like him in the first round. He's personally my number 2 overall quarterback. He throws with really good anticipation, probably the best in the class at doing so. He'll throw a deep out long before the receiver is breaking on his route, so he's got good timing with his receivers. He had good rapport with them, and that will translate really well to the NFL. I think he's a guy that does need to learn more, and he does need to get more experience, obviously, with 1 year of starting quarterback experience in college. But he's probably the most accurate quarterback in this class. His ball placement's really good, and he has a pretty good feel for the pocket. I think he's got to learn to read defenses better and get a feel for how defenses are trying to attack him as a quarterback, as evidenced by the game against Stanford in the bowl game. But he does show a really good ability to bounce back and, deliver it in clutch situations. Against Pittsburgh, he had a fourth quarter drive where he led the team down on 4. He had 3 fourth down plays that he converted in passes that were really nice balls. So he's a guy that I really like, and should be a first-round quarterback. And does probably need to sit a year to clean up some mechanical issues that he has, but he's a quarterback that, despite just having 13 games of starting experience, is really pretty polished for that little bit of experience.
So you touched on quite a few issues there. I want to try and flesh them out a little bit more. The first thing you mentioned was timing, and I think it's something we definitely saw with him even back in 2015 when he was coming in for spot duty. He still managed to find the rhythm almost instantly, which I think is a good sign for any quarterback. You also mentioned that sneaky athleticism that he has, that ability to move around in the pocket, to find those passing lanes, to escape pressure while still opening up downfield shots. I think we discussed last time with Deshaun Watson, and that's probably an area where Trubisky is ahead of his Clemson rival. The other issue was experience. We've heard this a lot recently, the fact that he only started for 1 year. We saw it with Wentz last year as well. But for me, that's not such a big issue. Ultimately, North Carolina were more successful with Marquise Williams at quarterback, and that's not because he's a better passer or prospect than Trubisky, but merely because he suited that offense better as a year ago.
Yeah, I agree. He still led the team, I think it was to 8 wins this year, in his first year starting, and they started off really strongly, and they had a couple of hiccups. They shouldn't have lost their last game of the season against, I think that was just South Carolina. So, he's able to lead his team to victories, and obviously had a really good season. He only threw 4 interceptions, 28 touchdowns. Showed pretty good numbers under pressure as well. He doesn't, if he's under pressure, he always is looking down the field to throw. He shows good accuracy under pressure. I think a little bit, one of the concerning things is that the ball placement isn't ideal under pressure, but he's able to show good mobility in the pocket and evade that. And the thing about him starting only 13 games throughout the history in the NFL, at least there's a correlation between the more games you start, the better of a likelihood that it is that you'll succeed in the NFL. You look at somebody like Mark Sanchez, who started only 1 season at USC, Ryan Tannehill, who only started 19 games at Texas A&M. Those guys have, they have Tannehill obviously is still a starting quarterback and is playing decently well, but he's not leading that team to continual playoff contention. Obviously, Mark Sanchez is not a third string quarterback. after being a couple years of having success. So, that's where the you have the issues with only starting 13 games, is that he doesn't have that experience of learning to read the defenses and getting a better feel for those. So that's, really, in the end, for me, the lack of experience of starting doesn't really play much into it, because I think like you said, coming in and in 2015, where he was able to make those anticipatory throws and created extremely well in not spot starts, but coming in late games or just spelling Marquise Williams, he was fine. So I think he has a mental makeup and the tools and the traits to be able to succeed in the NFL, despite the lack.
I think that's fair, but I would say there are a couple of other questions that I have with him. I mentioned you've been working hard on some of this quarterback charting, and there was something that really popped out to me when looking at a comparison between Watson and Trubisky. So on vertical lead plays, this is going to be corner routes and post routes mostly. Plays where Trubisky's driving the ball downfield. I think he has plenty of arm to make those throws, and he was accurate on 25% in 2016, almost exactly the same figure as Deshaun Watson. You move then to over the shoulder throws, which are much more are involving a lot more sort of touch on them. They're sort of level throws and fades and that kind of thing, where you perhaps need to take a bit of velocity off the ball. His accuracy falls to only 13.2% compared to Watson's 47.4%. And I think that was something that did show up on tape. I worry a little bit about his ability to penetrate levels of a defense if he's got to throw over and underneath coverage and between a safety, for example. I was wondering whether that was an issue you noticed, and whether you think it will be prohibitive to him becoming a top-level NFL quarterback.
I think that's something that he can develop, because I think, you look at the over-the-shoulder, the touch throws, trying to throw it. Those are definitely deeper throws, and he's fine throwing pretty much anything under 30 yards. It's when he's trying to go, deeper down the field, it becomes more of an issue. Watson is a lot better at those, and so is Patrick Mahomes. Both those guys have a better touch on their ball. And I think Trubisky can show good touch, and he shows that on shorter routes and underneath, that he can take the heat off the ball and throw it with better touch, and he's able to do that. So I think you're right. Yeah, initially he might struggle with that, and that might be another reason why he needs to sit and develop when he gets to the NFL. But that's something that I'm not overly concerned about. I think he throws a pretty decent deep ball when he's throwing with the velocity. But if he's trying to get it, fit it into a tight window, such as like in the back of the back of the end zone, he'll need to develop that a little bit. And I think the thing is that he does have the accuracy. So that's something that you can't really teach. You can improve it with some mechanical issues. And I think with, since he already has the accuracy, if he just fixes, his a little bit about his footwork and his arm motion a little bit, he should be able to hit those touch throws a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it will be perhaps a slight issue initially, but I think as he gains more experience, it will be something he's able to overcome, or at least deal with within his skill set. I think the scheme that he goes to will be helpful in that regard. But I'm with you in the sense that I see him as a first-round quarterback, and probably considering the need of some teams towards the top 10. We should probably mention the Storm game against Virginia Tech. Does that come into your reckoning at all, or should it just be discounted entirely? Because I know some people treat it almost as if it doesn't exist.
Well, I think you have to look at it. I think it's the same thing with Deshaun Kaiser. He was playing in a Hurricane game, and he wasn't very good. But with him, I don't think a lot of his problems in that game were because of the Hurricane. I think he was he made a couple of really bad decisions and started forcing things when his team got down big. And there's a couple of passes in there that were just, the ball just came out of his hand really funny, and he's missed because of the pure sheer of the winds, but he had more just bad decisions in that game than it was just inaccuracy because of the hurricane. So I think you have to look at that. They went down big and they started throwing a lot. He started trying to force things when they weren't there. So in terms of I don't think you can throw it away entirely, but in terms of accuracy, you do have to put it aside and think of discard that in terms of accuracy. But I think you still look at it in a decision making standpoint, because he had a couple of bad plays in that game just based on decisions.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the game plan in that game, it seemed like the Hokies were much better prepared than North Carolina. They were very conservative initially, and they got into a deficit and were basically cooked from that point on. So I'm with you there. I do think that it needs to be a factor in his evaluation, but we're not going to hold that against him relative to his performances throughout the rest of the season. So if you had to predict right now, who do you think is the best fit and the most likely landing point for Trubisky?
Best fit and team for him to go to, I think, for one, I think having him go to San Francisco and learning Kyle Shanahan's system would be really good for him. I think that would be a great fit. That's a team that they do a lot of play action. They have wide open wide receivers off of that, and he's able to what he's been able to do with quarterbacks and just basically elevate them to the best seasons that they've ever had. You look at Brian Hoyer in Cleveland. He's a guy that nobody thought of as a viable quarterback until what Kyle Shanahan was able to do with him, and Hoyer hasn't had as good a season until this past year, where he's maybe picking it up. But I think Shanahan would be a really good quarterback. He's a quarterback coach for him, or a head coach for him, because of the system that they run, and he knows how to develop quarterbacks and ease them into making more difficult throws and more difficult decisions, and tailor the system to him.
I think that's a good fit, and I would it be extreme to say that 2 isn't a reach for him? I know I discussed Watson at 1 as a possibility last week, but the longer this process goes, the more convinced I am that probably 3 quarterbacks don't end up getting out of the top 10.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It really will be how it all shakes out. Is it going to end up being something like in 2014, where Blake Bortles went number 3, and then they had basically had a run of quarterbacks starting with Johnny Manziel at number 22 until Teddy Bridgewater and Derek Carr in early second round. So yeah, I don't know how it's going to shake out. I do think they go top 10 though, because quarterback is such a huge need, and there's several teams that do need quarterback, and I think you're going to find a couple of big trades going into the top 10 to get these guys.
Well, great stuff, John. Thanks for joining me on this podcast, Shaw, and to you too, listener. Hope you've enjoyed it. Before you go, a reminder to check out the PFF Draft Pass. The new version has just dropped today. You can get PDF copies and online copies. A ton of great charts on there. I was checking out Trubisky's for this podcast before we came on. You've got his passing chart there. You can see which parts of the field he hits consistently. There's a ton of great content, rankings, grades, spider charts, anything you could want. So be sure to get on top of that and join us again soon for another podcast short.